Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another next session with a quite interesting conversation, which we can expect today, which is how to build a game-changing HCP portal for you and, of course, your customer. And the main intention and the abstract for this session would be that we all know pharma companies were rocked by the pandemic's impact, and the race to adopt to a very different new normal, but also looking for opportunity in rapidly evolving digital behavior and needs. So together with me, I have Richard Marcil, the Chief Customer Officer from Conversation Health. Hi, Richard. How are you? Can you say something about you, please?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Marcil. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Conversation Health. We are a conversational AI shop. And all we do is conversational AI for life sciences. In fact, we've built a platform that's only exclusively built for conversational AI. My background, though, is pharma. I'm one of you. I grew up in industry, and we're going to talk about how we continuously transform the business, but also really transform to 2022 customer experience and look forward to it. Presenting with me is Chuck Sachs from AstraZeneca. Chuck, who are you?
Hi, I'm Chuck Sachs. I'm an IT business relationship manager aligned with the medical organization in AstraZeneca for the better part of the last 13 years. One of the things that I get to oversee at AstraZeneca is azmedical.com, which is something that we make available to our HCPs to find medical information, someplace where we've deployed a chatbot to help people in the oncology space find what they need very quickly.
Thank you, Chuck.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Okay, so Dario, thank you for the opportunity. And I think to everyone, thank you for joining our session, right? And we're going to talk about building a best-in-class, best-of-breed HCP portal. It's 2021, almost 2022. Why are we talking about HCP portals? It seems a little old school. I think the fact is, though, that the pandemic has massively accelerated the business transformation of life science companies. It's had to. But most fundamentally, I think customer behavior has changed, right? HCPs particularly have become increasingly what we would call digital first in their thinking and their engagement, and maybe a little less human first. To a great extent, that's why we've seen a near 50% drop in Salesforce reach and access versus pre-pandemic levels. But it's not because HCPs don't want to engage the industry. They want to. They just want to do it differently and digitally. And in our experience, when we build really exceptional and rich and frictionless virtual engagements, HCPs will engage at scale and will do so at greater reach, greater frequency versus face-to-face. Chuck and I will speak to how we do build these exceptional, rich, and frictionless customer engagement portals. And again, take a view as an audience. This could be, some of these insights could be for a commercial website, could be for a medical information portal, or it could be for both. We'll split the presentation into kind of two sections. I'll take on the customer-facing view, and Chuck will lead on some of the internal-facing considerations. I think our goal in this session, though, is to provide you with real-world pragmatic insights on how to build and maintain an HCP portal that attracts, engages, and educates HCPs, right? Think of that HCP portal as a front door to the business and maybe even a linchpin to your commercial engagement strategy. I think at the same time, and I think Chuck will speak to this, we need to be able to build something like this in months and quarters, right? We need to be able to use many of the tools that we already have. And we have to be mindful of the reality of a life science company in 2022, right? We are global, we are local. We don't have unlimited budgets, and certainly we don't have unlimited resources. So we want to be very, very practical about this. Dario, why don't you skip to the first one, and let me jump to the first consideration, right? So in the context of developing a customer user interface, let's look at the competition in the context of the eyes of a physician, right? It's these guys, and they do it really, really well. They're a really tough benchmark, right? They're ubiquitous. I mean, Google search is easy to get to. It's on every and any device we have. And for an HCP, it's a quick pat and answer, kind of anywhere, anytime. but it's not perfect, right? It's Google. There's lots of results to scroll through. There's not always the right or most current results, just the most popular results. And oftentimes it does require for a physician to sift through the content. And usually that's long form content at that, right? So that's a gap. Equally important, there's no off-label content, right? So if a physician is looking for the latest medical or clinical insight, you likely won't find it on Google. Dario, you can flip over to the next one. Let's talk about a bit of a digital first design mindset, right? Our challenge is really thinking digital first, truly digital first. In industry, I grew up in industry. I think we talk about digital readiness and we still build to digital readiness or maybe fast digital second. The reality is that we need to start shifting that to digital first, right? Assume that the HCP portal is the first point of entry or the engagement for the HCP. How do we make it as easy to use as Google search bar, right? Think of your HCP portal. How close is it to the Google experience? I'll give you a very practical analogy. I was working with one of our clients who's just literally redrafted and rebuilt their global global HCP portal over the last really 6 months. And it's beautiful, it's cleaned up, it's meaningfully streamlined, yet it still has 3 search features on the website, right? I mean, we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of learning to be done, but we can do it. I think also think of how easy is it to get to your HCP portal, right? Is it through the corporate website, and then an HCP has to can access it through or is it a unique portal? And we see many manufacturers starting to use the moniker of like Ask Company or Ask Brand. That's becoming a bit of an industry standard. That's not a bad thing. And certainly I think we're seeing some best practice around traffic drivers, right? So as we really turn on and really invest in our HCP portals, we need to build traffic to them, right? If anything, it should be at minimal as visible as your 1-800 number if you're in America. So think of every piece of material you produce, your websites, your packaging and others, we should be able to get to that relatively quickly. And some are even using third-party websites where you can deploy like a mini Ask Company or a mini Ask Brand in the context of something that makes sense, certainly commercially first and foremost. The thing I'd call out though, actually before you go to the next one, Dario, the thing I'd call out is think of CX. I think one of the biggest assets we have, in pharma or life sciences is people, right? A medical specialist, a rep, or an MSL. How do we make sure that an HCP can access or escalate a discussion to human, right? Again, we want to be digital first, but we also want ready, fast access to humans. Google can't do that. We can do that. Let's flip over to the next one and let's see if we can play that. I think that to me is an example. What I want to bring to life is an example. There should be a video embedded in there. There you go. Can you? Look at that. So here for the audience, I say lean in on the screen and consume the experience. Right. This could be an Ask Company website. Physician comes in, logs in, and we're asking her to self-identify. And the reason we're going to do that is actually, if you're European, you have to do it. Potentially in North America, is that it allows us to personalize the experience. If you're an oncologist, I will present you with only the oncology products. And here you can see, in this case, the consumer, the customer, the HCP asking, selecting a couple of things she wants to do, but then quickly get to a quick therapeutic question and gets an answer. And that's a fairly easy question, but she'll follow that up with a bit more of a complex question. Now she also wants to connect with a rep or an MSL to potentially further that discussion and have a more substantive discussion. And again, we accommodate that, right? So immediate access to rich resources, immediate access to people, great experience that's personalized to me. And by the way, this entire transaction is memorialized or is memorized for follow-up, whether it's by the rep, the MSL, whoever that makes sense for. This is the type of experiences that our physicians are looking for, Our physician can access that experience directly off literally a mobile device, 24/7. It's rich, it's easy to use, and it's so much better than Google in many respects. The other thing I call out is that also look at the answers that were provided. Some of these were short form answers. I'm a physician, I'm busy, I've got a minute or two to get an answer. I'm not looking to read an entire document. I'm looking for a soundbite answer to my question. And that's it. Chuck, I see you smiling. Do you want to jump in with a few comments on some of that?
Well, I think that the customer facing is something that sometimes gets pushed to the end of some of these projects. And I would encourage everyone who's listening to think about what that customer experience is going to be from the very beginning. On the azmedical.com chatbot that I talked about earlier and mentioned earlier, we brought in advisors at the beginning of that project, external advisors, to ride with us through the creation of the chatbot experience, because we believed very strongly that making sure that we delighted the people that would be the targeted users of our chatbot was very, very important to the success of the chatbot. And they actually said some things that changed the direction of our program very early on. So the earlier you think about it, I think the better the outcome that you'll have.
Love it. And Dario, you can switch to the next slide. I think that builds into the next slide altogether. So it'll be number 4. I think you can click through. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, we've experienced this in all facets of our lives. I mean, part to Chuck's point, part of what we need to do is how do we make it easy for me as an HCP to engage all the great resources of the enterprise and its many services. And to Chuck's point, I think whether it's an oncologist will have very different needs than an immunologist or a primary care physician. How do we build these experiences, again, for ready access, for easy access, for almost frictionless access, but then get to what I need to get to quickly so I can most likely get out. I think Chuck and I talk, I think one of the language we talk about, HCPs particularly typically know what they don't know. So they want to get to it relatively quickly. They know how to ask for something. And I think it's our challenge to get them there as fast. The other piece that I think is really interesting in the context of further building this out into 2022 is what's the follow-on, right? There may be times where we want technology to answer some of these questions. That's great, right? Easy, quick questions. Let's make sure technology does what technology does best. Sometimes, though, it actually may be helpful to escalate to a commercial rep or an MSL because it's a complex topic. It's a sensitive topic. It's probably one that warrants a more meaningful dialogue. How do we start facilitating some of that? Not soliciting, adding value to physician education and engagement. And I think ultimately, a lot of you are probably starting to think and talk in terms of next best action and others. Again, the HCP portal is such a powerful way to orchestrate that next best action, which is just extending an experience. I think most importantly from our perspective, think of this as a bit of a contextual push based on a very specific ask from a physician. So we continue to add value, add value, add value. So I don't care if I'm a C physician or no C physician, I can engage the portal and you add value and I will continue that conversation, whether it's through email, SMS, a rep or others. Again, that HCP portal is that point of entry into the system. And Dario, you can move to the next one. I think fundamentally, the big consideration is around personalization, right? Obviously, we can do things in the commercial world that we can't necessarily quite do in the MedInfo world. But the more it can personalize, the more it can contextualize, the more powerful. I also think we've got to be careful as we move into 21, 22, post-pandemic era. We're clearly seeing our relationships, the physician HCP relationship is switching over from what's traditionally a rep or an MSL to potentially the company. How do we facilitate that, right? We'll still have a relationship with reps and MSLs, but we want to make sure that we institutionalize, again, memorialize these engagements with physicians across many touch points and build off of them, right? So really important as we look at 2022. Chuck, any considerations from personalization, gating, access from your perspective?
Well, there are requirements for that are going to differ around the world based on the country that you're in. You know, here in the United States, a simple attestation is compliant with regulatory rules, but as you mentioned, I think before, over in Europe, you have to identify yourself fairly well affirmatively before you're going to get the keys to the kingdom in the medical space. So, consistent with what we're going to talk about in just a little bit when we flip over to internally facing considerations, you should be aware of the different types of things that you're going to need to comply with around the world when you design your personalization experience. Some things you can collect in some markets, you can't collect in others. Some things you can proactively talk about in markets you can't in others. So understanding what the rules of the road are around the world will give you a great idea at the very beginning of what type of breadth and depth you're going to have to build into your model as you seek to fulfill the personalization in different areas.
That's great. I mean, and Dario, you can click through to that chart. There you go. Yeah, I mean, so Chuck, you're designing. So as a technician, as a planner to a certain extent, you are architecting that from all those multiple vantage points.
Yeah, when you start thinking about what you need to do internally to create your next generation portal, you're probably going to start small. And when I say small, probably with one market or a small targeted set of markets. But at the very beginning, there are some places where you're going to want to think a little bit bigger because of the various differing rules in different markets around the world. So as you architect your site, you want to architect it globally, but you want to leave that wiggle room to be able to configure it as you implement it in specific markets, which are going to have differing rules. And we learned that lesson on the fly with AZ Medical, where we created it for the United States. And then as we redesigned our site, after we learned some lessons about what we did and didn't like about the initial implementation, we almost rebuilt it from the ground up with a template that was globally scalable and locally configurable, which allowed us to immediately, after we deployed the US redesigned site, start jumping in with both feet on globally scaling our azmedical.com concept outside of the US. Right now, we're in 11 or 12 or maybe 13 different markets. So that's very important, so you don't have to go back and retrench. And that shared vision amongst all your stakeholders, that really, I think, goes a little bit more towards what you find on the next slide. So let's advance to the next slide, please. You want to start thinking about your content. We have a system in place at AstraZeneca which allows us to share our content globally, not only in English, but also translated into many different languages. And the reason why that's important is because not every market in which you're going to want to deploy your portal is going to have the local resources required to drive the content. As we all know on the internet, content is king or queen, depending on your point of view. And it's very important that you are able to feed that beast with new content on a regular basis to keep your customers coming back for the latest and greatest about your science. And having the ability to easily reuse your content and deploy it into markets where they might not have the same type of medical information staff locally to be able to create that content can be critical in deploying a richly supported content portal in a market that might not have the individual resources to do that on their own.
Yeah, and Chuck, I'd also, so yes to all of that. I'd also call out, it's interesting to see beyond the content strategy, the type of content, if I step back a little bit for the audience, the value of medical information content, med affairs content has also significantly increased, I think, over the last probably, I'd say 1 to 3 years, right? We've just seen the ascent of the medical information function, but also the want for physicians to engage medical and scientific content more frequently, more aggressively, and a lot of emphasis on off-label content, which is really key as we're developing relationships, unique relationships, company brand relationships with physicians. That medical information content is not something that we've aggressively historically distributed or provided access to. It used to be through a human. That's kind of new to medical information. Is that a fair statement?
I think that may vary from company to company. You know, at AstraZeneca, we do have a long history of having a web presence. Nothing as compelling as what we have right now, certainly. Nothing as widely used as what we have right now. But one of the things that was a great benefit to us in IT in working to create this new portal was a long history, not only in the experience of thinking about content being distributed over the web, but also in how that content needs to be maintained and reused internally So we had a large number of pieces that were already in place that we could use to assemble a compelling experience for the web. So I think that the lesson that I would take away from what you're bringing up, Rich, is that it doesn't start with the portal. It doesn't start with this great idea that you want to reuse it. It starts with the fundamentals of internally leveraging your content because your company believes it's valuable, and making sure that you have the ability in place to easily edit, reuse, and distribute that content to multiple endpoints from a single source of truth. And as we go to the next slide, what we have here is an illustration of content coming in from many places, but from an internal perspective, I think what we see is we have content going out to many different places from a single repository. We maintain all of our medical information in one place at AstraZeneca, and it feeds our CRM system for MSLs to share with HCPs in in-person conversations. It goes to azmedical.com. It goes to factmi.com, the US cross-industry medical information portal, which is hosted by the factmi.org organization. And it goes to many other different internal endpoints as well, like our publications team. So when someone needs medical information, they always get the most current, most recently approved version, one single source of truth, which is critical. It's a critical underpinning for any medical information portal that you would seek to deploy.
That's interesting. Chuck, just for the audience, who owns so both the development, the aggregation, the content is distribution. What type of roles are engaged in planning and architecting what's being pushed out, what's being developed, and others?
So that's a great question, because it truly illustrates the partnership that we've had between our medical information organization and the IT organization. The medical information organization came to us with a very well-defined, well-implemented, and well-understood process for how their content is maintained. And perhaps most importantly, a vision, a clear vision for what they wanted to accomplish with that content. And armed with that information, we had truly collaborative sessions about what we would be able to put in place for them and what that technology layer would enable for them. And we settled on Viva Vault as a single source of the truth, which handles not only the maintenance of the content, but its review, approval, and distribution as well through Viva Content Delivery Network. And that provides a very solid fit-for-purpose platform that everyone was able to rally around and very quickly got us critical mass. And which, as you know, we aspire to link up that platform with our chatbot as well. And I know that with one of your teams, we're working on making that happen. Absolutely.
And again, for the audience, I think is also tipping our hats to, in an increasingly digital, increasingly sophisticated world, leaning on our IT partners is key. I mean, both as keys to strategy, keys to enablement, keys to resourcing, keys to prioritization is really, really important, right? I mean, IT is not plumbing. IT is strategy. IT is architecting. IT is bringing the business vision to life. So super important to work with partners like Chuck, who do bring these dreams, these visions, these plans to life. Dario, you can skip to the next one. That's always a fun one.
Yeah, so at least at AstraZeneca, I can speak to how medical information is very deeply involved with content that gets created for commercial where scientific claims are made to ensure the accuracy and the fair balance of the information that's presented. But when it comes to presenting the information to the HCP, whether it's commercial information or medical information, we found the HCP doesn't necessarily know that there are medical information departments inside of pharmaceutical organizations that create scientifically accurate, fair, balanced content that's held to a very high standard here in the US with the FDA. And the HCP doesn't know the difference, but we both need to coexist and we both need to be compliant with what we present. So the challenge for us there is to present the right content to the HCP at the right time without running afoul of the regulatory rules that enforce our separation of the promotional content from the non-promotional content. So that's a vexing challenge as to how to weave those two things together. At AstraZeneca, the answer is we keep them separate.
Yeah, and really interestingly enough, at the end of the day, you'll still design commercial experiences or sorry, customer experiences will be designed almost irrespective of what that container is, right? At the end of the day, physicians looking for content, we're going to make it easy for her to get to the content she needs. Whether she knows it comes from commercial or MedInfo probably ultimately doesn't matter. And I think increasingly, technology will continue to make it easier for us to still maintain those church and state lines of compliance, but make the experience more seamless or invisible, frankly, for the HCP. I mean, that would be aspirational, but we're getting there, certainly from a technology standpoint.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'll very quickly speak to our last slide here about real-time data analytics and optimization. And I will put our chatbot dashboard front and center here, where we do have the ability to see in real time people's interactions with the chatbot, which is extremely valuable at times of heavier use, which would be Congress season, right? We really want to get insight into how the ability to get real-time short form answers from our chatbot can change the conversation in the middle of a Congress when we're presenting new data and people are going to be seeking information about that new data from our medical information channels. So being able to gauge, like we gauge Twitter, like we gauge social media, we can gauge our chatbot the same way, how that people are seeking the information from the chatbot and the conversations they're having with the chatbot, what kind of information they want, can be critical to how we respond to people at the Congress almost in real time.
Amazing, amazing. Love it. Dario, so it's 2021, almost 2022. Yeah, are HCP portals old school? No, they're not. Again, they're the point of entry into the business in a customer digital first mindset thinking and execution customer experience. Amazing work being done by a big number of companies. And again, CX, digital first, digital nativeness. There's so much work to be done, but there's amazing progress being done by many of our peers and colleagues in industry. So let's push on HCP. Long live the HCP portal, so to speak.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. It was a great pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Have a good day, everyone.